Hello everyone. Now tonight's episode is a little different. These aren't exactly ghost stories, but they're still pretty chilling in my opinion. Because it's about dreams and nightmares. Dreams and nightmares that actually come true. And what does that really mean? Are these really premonitions that we have? Or just sheer coincidence? I'll let you listen to the stories that I've gathered today, and then you can decide for yourselves. So without further ado, let's get on with the stories. Number 1. I work really early hours, and sometimes when I get home, I nap. One Wednesday in December, I came home and slept, and dreamt that someone I knew personally was dying by choking to death. That Friday, I learned on the news that a friend of mine from high school was found strangled to death in his office. He was killed that Wednesday, around the same time I had the dream. Number 2. In 2013, I dreamt I had a stroke and was desperately trying to explain to my husband what was happening. 2 years later, I woke up in the middle of the night on my couch with my husband and roommate looking at me concerned. I sat up. My left eye was in full paralysis, and I tried to tell my husband to call 911 because I was having a stroke. He couldn't understand me, but thankfully, he'd already called because while I was unconscious, I had a seizure. It turns out, I had a brain aneurysm rupture and only minutes to get to a hospital and in surgery. The whole thing was so disturbing. Number 3. My sister had a dream that some boy got killed in our neighborhood. She had never seen this boy before or knew his name. 2 days later, there was news coverage about a boy, the boy from her dream. It was my mom's friend's son, and he was stabbed to death in real life. So creepy. Number 4. I had a dream once, when I was in the woods, tripped over something and smashed my teeth in. I was an air cadet at the time, and there was an optional night exercise that was due to happen in my local woods in the same week that I had the dream in. I chose not to go. One of the more senior cadets did go on the night exercise. He tripped over something in the dark woods and smashed 3 teeth out. Number 5. I had a dream when I was about 6 years old about my granddad dying. In the dream, I was with my dad walking towards the hospital my granddad was at. He had heart troubles, and I went every weekend to see him in the hospital. While we were walking up, my aunt and uncle are walking towards us, and my aunt is crying. She tells us he's gone. A week later, that exact thing happened. I didn't tell my dad about the dream until I was about 17. Number 6. I dreamt that I was approaching an abandoned house, went inside to explore, and eventually came across this couple who go to the church I used to attend. The woman was holding a baby in her arms, and as I got closer to look at it, the baby was decayed, rotten, as if it had been dead for a long time, yet it was still screaming. Then, about a month or so later, the woman of the couple announced to everyone in my Bible study group that a newlywed couple from our congregation who were expecting their first child had just had a miscarriage. I'd never felt more traumatized in my life.
Number 7.
I had an extremely disturbing dream which had elements that I felt meant my husband was in imminent danger. I begged him not to go to work that morning because it was his last day at that job. But he wasn't one to call off work. So he went, and less than an hour later, he was killed in an accident. These things have happened throughout my life, and I learned long ago to trust my intuition.
Number 8.
When I was about 7, I remembered having these reoccurring dreams. We had just moved into this older house in a neighborhood that I'll keep anonymous, all because I don't want to be bombarded with questions. And not that it matters, but we were considered minorities, thus would explain why certain things were not disclosed to us when we got this specific house in this neighborhood. This was an older house that happened to be fairly cheap for the area, and so my parents took on the offer. When we got the house, the realtor said that we could either keep the existing furniture or dispose of them as we liked. My mother was a huge fan of Victorian-looking furnitures and furnishings, and with us being considered lower class, we decided to keep the furniture. There was a specific chair in the living room that always made me feel uneasy, even as a kid. It was an old rocking chair that still had its shape given the age that it had. But anyway, back to this dream. So for a few nights in a row, I would have this dream of myself walking downstairs and into my kitchen to grab a cup of orange juice from the fridge. On my way there, I would see an old white lady in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth, smiling and minding her own business. In my dream, I carry on, not being startled for some reason. I get my cup of orange juice, and when I turn around, the lady is now frowning at me. The chair is no longer rocking, and she is pointing dead at me. This is when I wake up in sweats. I remember telling my parents about my dreams, and they would never believe me. Other than the dreams, we've never had any paranormal activity in this house, though some parts of the home did feel extremely cold at times, whereas some were warmer. I eventually stopped having these dreams, and it wasn't until years later when we had moved elsewhere and I was actually old enough to know about doing my own research on various things online. Out of the blue one day, I decided to Google our old home, and the history shocked me. An old lady was said to have been a longtime owner of that house. She was robbed and killed one day, out of the blue. The two men responsible had stabbed her multiple times and placed her on a rocking chair to die. My life has never been the same since the findings of this story and the way that it ties to the dreams that I had as a child.